morning, everybody, and welcome to class number 4 of our 2025 virtual HOA and Condo Academy. Today is Tuesday, April 15th, and we are going to be doing a great topic today about HOA and condo vendor relations from hiring to firing. So I'm going to give just a few seconds for people to join our Zoom today and get settled for our class. So first, I just want to acknowledge that this is our 4th class of our 2025 virtual HOA and Condo Academy. Welcome. We teach this HOA and Condo Academy virtually in partnership with the cities of Avondale, Chandler, Glendale, Goodyear, Mesa, Peoria, Phoenix, Scottsdale, Surprise, and Tempe. My name is Beth Mulcahy, and I'm the founding partner and senior partner of the Mulcahy Law Firm in Phoenix, Arizona. As you may or may not know, I have represented HOAs and condominiums in the state of Arizona for over 28 years. And my firm currently represents over 1,000 HOAs and planned communities and condominiums throughout the state of Arizona. I also currently serve on my HOA board, and I have for many years. In today's class, we have a really useful topic. I think for everybody, it's something that associations use all the time. And that would be providing strategies for bidding, contracting, and selecting top-notch service providers. And we're also going to talk a little bit about how to gracefully end vendor relationships when necessary. As always, we will have our question and answer period at the end of the class. Usually I teach for about an hour, and then we do about a half an hour to 45 minutes of answering questions. I'll conclude the main presentation hopefully right at noon, and we'll move right into the questions at that time. Due to the large number of attendees during these virtual classes, please note that it's only one question per attendee. If you're joining us on Zoom, please be sure to submit your question in the Q&A box. And if you're joining us on Facebook Live, please type your question in the comments section. Okay, before we get started, I always like to do a poll to see who's here today. So I know that this is already on your screen, so if you wouldn't mind, I'm asking for as much participation as possible so I can tailor the class to best suit the needs of the attendees. First, we'd like to know which city do you reside in, meaning which city is your HOA or condominium located in. And we give you a number of different options. And then the second question is, what is your current role with the HOA or condominium? Are you a board member? Are you a community manager? Are you an interested homeowner or other? And it looks like we have such a good attendance today. I'm really happy to see this. We have 120 plus attendees on Zoom right now. Okay, we're going to go into our quick update on the pending legislation, and then we'll go back to the poll results. As many of you know, the Arizona legislature is in session right now and has been in session since early January. And we are watching a number of bills pertaining to HOAs and condominiums to see what legislation is passed this year and signed by our governor into law. As of right now, as of yesterday at about 1:00 p.m. when we did our last check, there are 2 bills to date that have been signed by the governor. The first one is Senate Bill 1039. And this bill requires that if a board records a meeting that is open to the members, the board shall keep a copy of the recording for at least 6 months and make the unedited version of the recording available to any member on request. And that was signed on 3/31 of 25. And so obviously that's going to change how we handle open board meetings, because if you are recording the meeting, then we're going to have to keep a copy of it. And if any owner wants to see it, we'll have to keep a copy of it for 6 months and then make that unedited recording available to them if they request it. I don't think that's going to be too difficult to comply with, especially with Zoom and all the other technology that most of the associations in Arizona are now using for their meetings. Okay, the second bill is House Bill 2322, and this bill pertains only to condominiums and commercial structures, and that was signed by the governor on April 7th, 2025. So really significantly change how we operate and do business in Arizona as of right now. As we start to move closer to the legislative session ending, we will be giving you an update each class as to the bills that have been signed into law by our governor, and recognize that these bills will not go into effect until 90 days after the legislative session ends. So right now, only 2 bills have been passed. It looks like the legislature has not made a lot of progress on passing the budget, which is kind of the key indicator as to how long the legislative session is going to be this year. So without any significant movement on the budget, it looks like this may be a longer legislative session this year. So we'll keep you posted and, update you every time we're, on Zoom right now for our First Fridays or for our neighborhood services virtual HOA Condo Academy going forward from this class. Okay, let's go back to our poll. We have a great attendance here today, 120 plus attendees on Zoom as of right now, and many more joining us on Facebook Live. So the first question, let's see here. I think my things got moved around a little bit. You know what? I only have the, there was an issue apparently launching the poll on the cities, so I'm sorry about that. Not sure what happened on that, so we'll have to kind of guess, or maybe we could do the poll later in the class so we have the statistics, if that's possible. But the second poll worked, however, so we do know what is your current role for the association. We have 63% are board members, 9% are managers, 23% are interested homeowners, and other is 4%. So we have a great turnout of, representatives in an association as board members here today, and also a few managers and also interested homeowners. So thank you all of you for being here today. If my office hasn't already shared it with you, we will be sharing with you a full summary of the pending legislation on Facebook Live and on Zoom. And you also can find that on our website. We update that frequently on our website, so at least twice a month. So if you're really interested in the pending legislation, you can always go to our homepage of our webpage and there's a link there. Okay, let's get into our topic for today, which is strategies for bidding, contracting, and selecting top-notch service providers, and also how to gracefully, work with vendor relationships, whether it's, knowing when it's time to move on, or whether it is terminating the relationship, maybe hiring a new vendor after you terminate the relationship. We're going to be kind of talking all things vendor today. Okay, so let's first start out with, we have a really good cheat sheet on bidding and contracting. And we also have another really good cheat sheet on how to select a management company that I think would be helpful if you are ever, looking for a resource online. We have that on our webpage for our firm at mulcahylawfirm.com. And we also are going to be providing you a link today. So let's talk first about bidding and contracting on large projects. A lot of associations in Arizona now are aging communities. There was significant growth in Arizona in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, and a lot of associations were built in that time. There was, in fact, an explosion of HOAs and condominiums that were built during that time. And a lot of those aging communities are now facing, serious infrastructure problems that need to be upgraded, deferred maintenance. Just in general, a lot of these associations need to take, significant action to make sure that the property values, are maintained and that your amenities are, able to be used and are, evolving with the times. And just maybe need to be in good functioning repair, so that there aren't major issues. So what do we do if we have a project, like a large project? Like I know my association where I live right now, we are in need of a master plan for our community. The community was built in the 70s and, we're 50 years old now. And so I have my board meeting this week on Thursday, and we're going to be talking about hiring a company to help us, navigate a master plan, which means that basically everything is in need of upgrading. And we can't pay for it all at once. And so we're going to try to come up with a master plan that will be somewhere between 5 and 8 years. And we're going to just kind of tick things off each year, come up with a plan and tick things off each year. But sometimes associations have, just smaller projects. Like I'm frequently asked, hey, our clubhouse is in need of a major renovation, or we need our pool, we're being cited by the county because our pool is not up to code. Or, our landscaping is very turf heavy and we want to convert it to, desert landscaping or landscaping that is going to be not needing as much irrigation. And so kind of, when you're having a project like this, depending on the size of it, I mean, sometimes they're easier projects, like, oh, we've got a section of the wall that needs to be repaired. Or maybe you need to have all of your roofs, totally redone in a condo, and that's going to be a major project. So you kind of have to figure out, okay, what's the scope of this project? Is it a master plan, a total redo? Is it, a large project on one item, or is it just kind of like a small issue that, we just need to fix, and it's, not something that's, going to be a huge issue. So kind of the first thing, and I'm going off of the bidding and contracting cheat sheet loosely here, is, identify what the project is. So what exactly are, what type of a vendor do we need? And what type of work needs to be done? And so, oftentimes you're doing things based upon the lifespan that's been given in the reserve study, or maybe you're being cited by the city because there's a problem with the amenity. Or maybe there's just general wear and tear and you can see it and it needs to be, replaced or repaired. So really the first thing you want to do is identify what is the project that we're, trying to accomplish. And then what's the necessity of it? Is this something that can wait a year, or is this something that's immediate? Like, we need to take action on this right now because maybe there's a violation with the city, the town, or the county. Also, I think we have to discuss, what type of funding do we have in our budget to, proceed forward with this project? Do we have the money in our reserve account? Do we have to pay for this? Do we have to do a special assessment? Do we have to get a loan? All of these are important considerations. And when you're trying to figure out the funding, it's a really good time to reach out to your attorney to, determine, like, if you have to have a special assessment, like what exactly is the procedure that we would need to follow? Or can our association even take out a loan? Is that something that our documents allow? Basically, at this initial part is kind of the project identification. This is really important because it's kind of like we're narrowing the scope of, okay, what are we doing? How are we going to pay for it? What's our timeline for this, etc. Also, you want to make sure that what you're, fixing is actually the association's responsibility. I've had situations sometimes in the past where an association might spend a great deal of money on something and then they find out later, oh, we weren't even responsible for that particular issue. And that sometimes comes into play with walls. Maybe if it's facing a common area, we're only responsible for the side of the wall that's facing the association. And maybe the other side of the wall is a homeowner responsibility. And so it's important to just identify, hey, is this our responsibility as well before we're, spending a lot of the association's funds to fix it. Okay, then the next thing you want to think about, and this is going to be probably for your larger projects, is what's the scope of the work, or what type of specifications do we have for this project? So the board, or maybe you need a consultant or an engineer or a specialist, is going to establish a detailed description of what needs to be done. And this is going to be, it could be really detailed on the technical sides of this project, or, how long it's going to take, and also your attorney should be consulted at this point about, the scope and, again, how you're going to pay for this project. Okay, next thing is if you're looking for a vendor for, one of these projects in your association. A good way to find a vendor is to ask your management company, do they have any suggestions? Ask your attorney. Also you can ask other associations that, maybe in your neighborhood and you've noticed that they're doing a lot of work with the contractor. So definitely you want to check references, do financial research on the companies, especially if it's a large project. See if they're being sued, and your attorney can help you with that, or you can just go to your county Superior Court website to see if they're named as a defendant. You also want to check with the Arizona Registrar of Contractors for licensing, bonding, and insurance that the contractor may have, and also check to see if the contractor has any complaints against them. Because in my experience, if there are complaints against the contractor, it is very likely that there are going to be problems with your project if you hire that contractor. Now, maybe if there's one complaint that was filed and it's been resolved, maybe, I wouldn't say that that's, a generality that I would apply it to that contractor. But if there's many unresolved complaints, that is a warning sign that this is not a contractor that would be a good idea to hire. In addition, you may want to check to make sure that they actually know how to do whatever they're bidding on, that they have the technical training and certifications and any professional designations that are appropriate for the scope of work to be completed. Researching the vendor backgrounds will save time and is more likely to result in, qualified vendors who are going to give us good bids. Okay, typically what you're going to do if you are, like, let's say for a larger project would be, you're going to request for bids. And this can even be for smaller projects. But really, since COVID, we're lucky if you're doing a minor repair, like let's say you're changing out, a wall or something, a section of the wall, and it's, maybe $6,000. You may not be able to get more than two contractors to even bid on it. So on the larger projects, like a repainting of an entire condo or re-roofing of the condo, redoing the pool, you're going to want to get at least 2, maybe 3 bids if you can do that. So anytime we are looking for bids, we want to send out, a request for a bid to the vendors, and it's going to contain the technical or other information that's needed to allow a contractor to be able to respond with a comprehensive written bid for the project. So it's typical to submit the request for bid to like two or 3 contractors. If there's more contractors, you might go as high as 4 or 5. You're going to want to include a form asking that the contractor specifies certain things so that you're comparing apples to apples when you actually review the different contractors that submit the bid. Also, you want detailed specifications of the project, including the quality of the materials that are going to be used, if that's something that's important for the project, the project location, specifications as to when they're going to give us the bid back, like a due date for the bid, and a contact person should be sent to each qualified contractor in case they have questions after they look at the specifications. For larger projects, you may want to hold like a pre-bid conference. And, for other projects, you might just, look at the bids and then only bring in the vendors that you're actually considering to hire for an interview. And basically one thing that I would say that I found as an attorney that works with associations, if the contractor is willing to come out before they submit the bid and actually look at the project, that's a good sign. Because they want to know more information and they want to look at it. So giving them an opportunity to do that, I think, is smart. We can give you, like on our cheat sheet, we have a list of the different types of things that you may want to include in a bid for some of these larger projects. And I would encourage you to take a look at that cheat sheet if you are doing a large project to give you some idea of what the bid would look like. Okay, after the bid comes in from the contractors, the board's going to compare the bids and select the contractor. And the board should compare each bid line by line, and that's why it's really helpful to have them return the bidding specification sheet so that we can compare, the price and all the other different items that you have on the bid. And then they likely should select the 2 bids that best meet their specifications. And then you're going to be interviewing them to determine which is the best contractor. Sometimes and remember, you've already done all of your due diligence to contractors, right? Before you even ask them to bid on it. So you already know, that they are not being sued by a lot of people. You checked with the Registrar contractors, and maybe through the comparing of the bid process, you've also checked the references that they've provided. When you're evaluating bids as part of this, comparing the bids and select the contractor process, be wary of the bid that is substantially lower than all of the other bids. In my experience over the past almost 29 years, it'll be 29 years, next month. My experience on this is that usually the bid that is the lowest bid, when the board selects that, most of the bids usually come in like right around the same rate, right? And then there's always one that's like way low. And on that one, my experience is that if the board hires them, it ends up costing more than what you would have paid if you had hired the one that was in, the mainline price range. And what typically happens is they bid it low, and then there's a bunch of change orders, and that ends up costing the association more money. And so be wary of the really low, the significantly lower bid, like anything, that's like 25% lower than all the other bids. You may have a meeting to select the contractor, and you can ask questions, have the board ask questions during the meeting if they have any specific questions, or just meet the contractor and get a feel for them and how you might be able to work with them on this project if you think that it would be a good team to work together with them. Oftentimes I've sat through these presentations as the lawyer for the association, and oftentimes the contractor will come in for the interview, and they'll have a PowerPoint showing the association members, because this will be done in an open meeting, what they can do. And I think that's a really helpful exercise, because oftentimes they give you background on the company. They'll show you other projects that they've done that are similar right on a screen. And they will then tell you what their plan is and their vision is for your association and how much it's going to cost. And at that point, then you can ask different questions about, whatever they're proposing. And having open questions, have the board ask the questions first. And usually the homeowners aren't overly involved unless you have an owner that has a lot of technical experience. So if the board just wants to limit the questions from the board, they can do that. Of course, before the board takes action to hire a vendor, where there's a motion and a second to hire like ABC Pool Company to redo a pool, there should be, if an owner wants to discuss anything about that during the discussion after the motion and the second, the association would be required to let that homeowner do that. So really the second part of this is, comparing the bids and then selecting the contractor after you looked at all the materials and had the contractors in for an interview. Okay, just some pointers just before we close the loop on these, when we're hiring and selecting a contractor. Depending on the size of the project, you want to check and recheck and ask about the following. You want to make sure you're contacting all of their references and ask them questions about the timeliness of the project, the quality of the work, how they handled problems that arose. Were there a lot of change orders? Were the work materials what they had, indicated in the bid? The company owners' names and the correct spelling. You want to double check to make sure that if there's problems, we know how to reach them. The contractor's license numbers and the contractor identification cards. We also want to check to make sure that the contractor's license is in good standing. We want to check the contractor's website and their phone numbers to make sure that they're functional and working. We want to get an emergency contact for the contractor. I've had many different situations with contractors over the years where maybe the contractor passes away during the project or they just disappear. And so we want to have, emergency contact information for the contractor. If they're going to use subcontractors, we want to have a list of the subcontractors and the contact numbers that they're going to be used. We also want to check the license and bonding and insurance of those subcontractors. We're going to ask for proof of liability insurance. In addition to what's listed on the Registrar of Contractors website, we'll want to see proof of insurance that, for their liability insurance and workman's comp insurance. Remember that, guarantees should be in writing. So if they say, we guarantee this work for 8 years, have them put it in writing. Verbal guarantees, really don't hold up. Also, change orders. There's probably going to be change orders if it's a large project, because that's just the way things go. All change orders should also be in writing and approved by both sides, both the association and the contractor. If necessary, ask about building permits, because sometimes a hidden cost is they put in the bid, the association's responsible for obtaining the building permit, and that may be an additional cost that you weren't anticipating. For a larger project, ask for lien releases for each subcontractor working on the project. When necessary, you may need to verify that those lien releases have actually been done. Typically, we see that before a project starts, either the contractor or the subcontractors may send you, a lien that they have a lien on the property, and you just want to make sure at the end of the project that all those liens are released. Remember on pricing, it just depends on what the project is, but make sure the pricing is clear, and make sure that it's clear when the money is owed. Sometimes, on a larger project, we put a certain amount of money down and then a certain amount of money at, 30%, another certain amount of money at 66% or whatever the agreement is. Make sure that that's listed. It'd be very unusual to just have the association pay 100% up front. That's not typically how these projects are handled. Okay, let's talk about the contract with the contractor. So let's say you decide that you're going to select a contractor, and now there's a written contract that the association and the contractor are entering into. And again, this is going to be for larger jobs. It's not going to be like somebody, coming out to, paint a wall because there was some sort of damage. This is going to be like a larger project for a community, redoing a major common area, re-roofing, painting the common areas, painting common area walls or the buildings. These are the type of things that we typically see. So when you get a contract for a larger project, you definitely want to have your attorney review the contract. The main thing that really I'm looking for, there's a number of things I look at, but really the most important thing to me is how do we fire them if things aren't working out, and what are our remedies if things aren't going well. So what type of things can we do if the contractor isn't performing? And, if we want to get out of the relationship, how easy is it for us to do that? But also when we're looking at a contract, there are some other things that we look at. I'm looking at, does the contract clearly define who the parties are to the contract, and does it define the responsibilities of each party? Is it clear what they're doing, what the contractor's going to be doing for us? And are they bringing in subcontractors to do the work, or are they doing the work themselves? Are there any hidden costs, like on the Exhibit A, like I talked about, the permit fee, or, if the price for materials goes up, is there going to be an additional cost that maybe we don't have the money to pay, especially if we're financing this or we're doing a special assessment for a certain amount? Is there a hidden cost that actually could cause us to be over budget on this and not be able to pay the bill? Do we have start and completion dates in the contract? Maybe you want to consider having a bonus for them finishing early to get the project moving along, or maybe we want to give them a penalty if they don't finish by a certain date. There should typically be a termination clause in case the parties have a disagreement on something. Is how we pay them, is that clearly defined? Like percentage upfront, percentage, what points during the process? How do we handle conflicts that come up or change orders that are needed? All of this needs to be addressed in the contract. What about negligence on the part of the contractor? What if they make a mistake? How is that handled? How is it handled if somebody's hurt, or they damage the association's property? That's very common that happens if it's a really large project. Maybe they bang up our streets, or they break the front gate, or they knock over somebody's, mailbox. How are all those things handled pursuant to the contract? Those should be written into the contract. What about insurance? When are they going to provide us the insurance information, the general liability insurance, and any bonds that we may, need in the event that they fail to do what they're supposed to do under the contract, or they damage something? Make it clear that, board members are not personally liable to pay the debt. This is the debt of the association. And really consider hiring an attorney to review this contract, because you're spending a lot of money to do the project. You want to make sure that if there's any problems, we've thought about them in advance and the contract is written in a favorable way to the association. Typically, the contractor writes the contract, and so of course it's going to be written in their favor. So you want to balance that out by having your legal counsel review the contract. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the Arizona Register of Contractors. So the Arizona Registrar of Contractors is a very important resource for associations during the bidding and contracting process. A lot of free information is listed on the Register of Contractors website in Arizona. And it allows us to, go to the website. We can type in the contractor's name, Make sure that they're licensed and bonded. Check to see if there's any complaints against them, and if there are, how they were resolved. And directions, it also can tell you on the website if you're having a problem with the contractor regarding their quality of work, you can make a complaint, and the Registrar of Contractors will come out and inspect the work and possibly force the contractor to comply with any violations that they may have under Arizona law. And so it's a really helpful tool for associations. And I would encourage all board members, if you're getting involved in a project like this, where it's a major project for your association, where you're hiring a contractor, you may want to become familiar with that website. It's very user-friendly. It has a lot of great information. We've kind of talked a little bit about this previously, about how important it is to bring in your trusted advisors as you're doing one of these projects, but obviously your management company will play a role, and they may be helping you get the bids and helping you with information about vendors that they've used at other properties. Your attorney is going to be very important to help you review that contract before you sign it. Also may help you through the bidding process. Your insurance agent, just making sure that our insurance agent is aware that this project's going on, if it's a big project, and is there any additional insurance that we may need to have. And also a reserve specialist or the reserve study in terms of what projects may need to be done. Your reserve study is likely going to be telling you, okay, in 2025, we need to, redo the pool, or we need to redo the roof because its useful life has expired. Okay, so that just kind of is a really good summary of, how to a process for selecting a contractor as part of a master plan or a part of a large capital improvement project in your association. You also can use a similar formula for smaller projects in your association, but that just kind of gives you a great overview of what are the types of things that you should be thinking about and worrying about, so that you can make good choices and you're hiring vendors that are qualified and will do a good job. Now, when things go bad, a quick thought on that. Oftentimes, we're brought in as the attorney for the association when there's a problem. And the typical problems we see are that the management or the company that you hire, the vendor, maybe they go out of business, or they file bankruptcy, or they're not showing up anymore, or their work product is horrible. Or maybe it was fine, like they painted all of our buildings and it looked okay, but over time, the paint started chipping, over 6 months because they didn't power wash the building before they started the painting. And, a good thing to do is think about, as problems come up, reach back out to your trusted advisors, your management company, and your attorney to talk through these issues, because you do have remedies, and you want to make sure that you're, addressing those sooner rather than later with the vendor. Same thing with, any guarantees they may have given you, making sure that those are in writing. And then if there's a problem, reaching out to the company to get them to honor the guarantee. Okay, so I think we gave you a good overview of different things to think about on bidding and contracting for larger or smaller projects within the association. Now let's talk about kind of the management companies and maybe other vendors that you are hiring for your association. Probably the biggest decision an association has is, who is going to be their management company, because they're kind of the face of the board, right? Because they're interacting with the owners. They're the ones that are answering the owners' questions. The owners are calling them. Are they responding to calls quickly? Are they, on top of the maintenance in the common areas? Are they, handling things so that their time on the board is, not stressful? And so, lots of different changes going on in Arizona right now with management companies. Some of you, we've been getting calls really for the past 3 years about this, but a lot of companies from outside of Arizona, specifically Texas and California, are coming into Arizona right now and buying Arizona-based management companies. And that's become a trend that we're really noticing over the past few years. Kind of came to a head last year, and the trend has continued into 2025. And so what does that mean for associations? Well, Arizona was a little bit behind, I would say, in terms of the development of, associations. So our big boom in Arizona was really the 90s and the early 2000s, that 20-year period. But a lot of associations, like in California, I mean, they've been around a lot longer, and they have more history. And so when associations started to take off in Arizona, we had kind of more local management companies and people who lived in Arizona who were the CEOs and presidents of the management companies. Well, with the changes that we're seeing now with management companies from California and Texas coming in and buying out those locally owned management companies, I'm getting a lot of questions from boards like, hey, we used to work with management company A, and now they've been bought out by this other management company that's out of state, and things have really changed. It's maybe not as much personal attention, or we're not happy because all of our accounting has to go to Texas, and the left hand isn't talking to the right hand, and so we're starting to hear some problems with some of these changes that are occurring across the board in our industry. I mean, this is not just a couple of management companies. This is like 70% of the management companies. There has been, change in ownership over the past few years. So in Arizona, so it is a change. So kind of like, how do we handle this with the management companies? And so I think kind of a few things that let's talk about. So, if you are, if you currently have a management company, let's start with that, and you're not happy with them, what do you do? So my best recommendation to you is to talk to your direct manager first and tell them what you're concerned about and give them a timeline for improvement. If the direct manager doesn't improve, or if whatever the situation is, maybe it's the financials aren't being provided to you, or they're not right, or they're not on top of collections, or they're not on top of violations, or they aren't paying their bills on time for the association, address your concerns initially with the manager. And if that doesn't improve, then really the next thing you need to do is escalate it up the chain of command in the management company. Maybe they have a director of all managers and ask to talk with that person. And if that doesn't work, then maybe you need to consider going to the CEO of the company and talking about, the problems that you're having. Maybe you need to ask for a manager change. Maybe a situation is that, hey, the manager you have isn't working and you want to try somebody new. Or maybe you get to a point where you're like, hey, this relationship is just so strained. It's not working. We need to think about making a change to a different management company. And again, you want to reach out to your trusted advisors through this process. Your attorney is going to be, somebody that you can talk to, and that person, will keep the information that you provide to them confidential. You want to be really careful that if whoever attorney you're hiring is not in any way associated with the management company. Like if the management company is really pushing your association to use a certain attorney, I think a valid worry would be that, hey, if I go to that attorney and I say, hey, I want to fire ABC Management Company, is that attorney going to keep that information confidential? And are they going to take your side in any dispute that there may be with the management company if, they're have a strong relationship with the management company? I think that's a very valid concern that you need to be thinking about. One thing that I really pride myself on and our firm on is that we do not, form any alliances with management companies. I mean, we work with every management company in Arizona, and, we strive to have a good relationship with them because we're partners in servicing the associations. But I don't have, like any management company that, I represent. I would never represent a management company because my client is always the association and the board of directors for the association. And I need to be independent of the management companies because disputes arise all the time. And I need to be able to send them a letter saying, hey, I'm sorry, but you're fired. I need to keep anything that my client tells me confidential. So it's very important that if you're having a problem and you're getting ready to fire the management company, that you are, talking to a trusted advisor, an attorney who is going to keep whatever you tell them confidential and give you candid advice about the firing of the management company. Okay, so let's say we've talked about, if you've got problems, you try to resolve it, internally with the management company. If that's going nowhere and it's time to make a change, How do we go about this change? A couple thoughts, if you're getting ready to fire your management company or really any vendor, you want to look at the contract and see what the termination provisions say. Oftentimes, there's a board in place that didn't hire that management company, so they may not even have a copy of the contract. So a good thing to do, in my opinion, is to ask the management company, can we please see a copy of the contract? Now, just so you know, from practical standpoint, the management company, when you say that, they're going to know, like, oh, that's not good, we're going to get fired, right? And so if you're worried that the management company is going to stop performing if you ask for a copy of their contract, or they're going to retaliate against you or quit, before you have a chance to fire them, which does happen sometimes, what you could do is just ask the management company instead for, hey, we want to put together a binder of all contracts. So could you please put that together for like pool company, the landscaping company, the management company, and any other vendors that you may have, like your attorney, your CPA, your reserve company. And therefore, it's not so obvious that you're asking for the contract because you want to fire the management company. Once you get that contract, you want to be talking with your attorney, again, that you trust and that's going to keep this information confidential, and figure out, hey, how do we get out of the contract? So there's usually a termination provision in the contract. And so we'll take a close look at that and determine, like, what's the timeline? Do we have to give 30 days notice to the management company? Do we have to give 60? Sometimes contracts are written in a certain way where it says you can only terminate the contract 90 days before the contract renewal date. And that's the only time you can do that each year. And to me, if I'm reviewing a contract with the management company, I never, and I mean never, agree to that, because it traps the association. If you're not in that 90-day window, you got to wait a whole nother, however many months it is to get in that 90-day window to terminate them. And I always am thinking to myself, if a management company is putting that into their contract, they're extremely insecure that they're going to be fired. And typically I do see that from the management companies that, they're in it for the money, and they may not provide as good a service, and they are just kind of, holding on, getting paid out on that when the association really wants to fire them a lot sooner, which is not good. So typically what we're suggesting, if you're looking at, the management company contract, I would recommend that you have like a 30, 60, or 90-day termination provision. That would be really the only thing I would agree to if I were reviewing the contract. But regardless, at this stage, you're looking at, how do I fire the management company? So we got whatever you signed, a couple pointers here. So now you know how to terminate your existing management company. How are we going to handle, this whole situation with getting rid of the management company? Because the management company typically notices our meetings, and we can discuss in an executive session the performance of the management company. But really the hiring and firing of the management company is going to need to be done in an open session. So, this is where you really want to reach out to your trusted advisor and be your attorney and say, okay, here's the deal. We're unhappy with this management company. Here's the termination provision. We have to give them 60 days notice. How do you think we should set this up? And if I were evaluating it, I would look at, okay, who's the management company? Because I know different management companies are professional or not professional based upon the transitions I've seen from my clients with them over the past, 25 plus years. And so it may be a different strategy depending on who you currently have. But I would say most of the management companies in Arizona, they handle their transitions really professionally. They recognize boards change. They make mistakes, and sometimes they get fired. And so most of them are professional. Occasionally we'll run into a management company that, like, we tell them they're being terminated and they stop doing all work, and then they, don't give us our records, and it's just a nightmare. We've got to, the lawyer has to get involved and really navigate the issue to help the association, get what they're entitled to get under the contract that we just terminated. So good time to have your trusted advisors around to help you on that. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what do we do? There's, you got to decide what the timing's going to be. I personally am of the opinion that you just tell the management company if they're being fired that I'm sorry, it's over, and we're now working on, finding a new management company. Because word gets out, in Arizona is a very small, town. Even though we're growing a lot, it's still a small town, and a lot of these management company heads know each other. And so if you're firing management company A and you're not telling them they're being fired, but you're going to fire them, and you're calling management company B and saying, hey, we're looking, we want to hire a new management company, the first thing that probably is going to happen is management company B CEO is going to call management company A CEO and be like, what's this association like? Why are you being fired? And, it's complicated because if that happens and management company A doesn't know they're being fired, they're probably just going to terminate you, the association first. So I think it's best. I mean, I look at each situation based upon the reputation of the management company and how our transitions have handled before. And I'll be advising you if you're reaching out to me like, okay, my experience with this management company is they're great professional. I think we should just tell them that they're being terminated, and then we need to expedite and plan out the process to hire a new management company. If the management company is notorious for being difficult with the transition, maybe what we say is we tell them that we're price checking and we are putting the management contract out to bid. We still, would like them to bid on it. But we are going to be putting out, a bidding process. And that way, their performance might even improve a little because they are, knowing that they could be replaced. And I've actually have had associations that they end up staying with the original management company because the management company, realizes, hey, this manager's not working and we need to improve our service. And they end up saving, the contract that way. But more times than not, a lot of associations, it's over. The relationship is sour, and they want to move on to a different management company. Okay, let's talk a little bit about you've made the decision to fire your management company. You have consulted with your trusted advisor attorney, and you've decided, are we going to terminate the former management company or the soon-to-be former management company? Or are we going to invite them to bid because we're sending out RFPs to check pricing on management companies and possibly to hire a different one if the pricing that we're paying is not consistent with industry standards. So how do we pick a management company? And this is a major decision because this honestly is kind of like the face of the association, right? And so, I think what you want to do is ask around, ask your attorney, ask your insurance agent, ask your CPA, ask other associations that are close proximity to your association. Which management company do you use? How do you like working with them? A lot of times boards will contact me and say, can you suggest a management company to me? And I'll say, yes, tell me what your problems were with the former management company or the management company that you want to fire. Because maybe they'll say, our financials are never right, or they never return phone calls. And so I'll try to point you in the direction of a management company that is really strong in those areas so that whatever deficiency the prior management company had, we'll make sure that whoever we're referring you to has that strength of the management company. And so a couple things that we, will look at after you, come up with your list from reaching out to all those different people to come up with a list for a good, list for management companies that you may want to interview. We want to consider the company's reputation. I would look at their online reviews. I think that's important. I'd look at how long the company's been in existence, were they recently purchased or sold to a third party. Do they have a lot of manager turnover? I think that's really valid question. Are the managers there to stay, or are you going to have people quitting all the time? And how solid is their financial department? And what procedures do they have to handle the large number of phone calls that come in from your homeowners, and how quickly do they respond to them? And so really some questions that you may want to consider. Ask other associations who are like that in close proximity, because it's easier for a management company to have a number of properties in a very close proximity versus having one property in Surprise, Arizona, and the other property in Mesa. For the manager, I mean, that's going to make it difficult because that's like basically an hour and a half differential between, going from point A to point B. So these are all really great questions that you may have. We have a cheat sheet that kind of goes through how to select a management company that I think that you may want to look at. We give you some, about 8 different things that you can look at on, the best way to hire a management company. And we give you some suggestions like, research the reviews that are online of the management company, because those can be telling. I mean, anybody can get a few bad reviews, but if they're consistently rated at like a 2 or a 1, that's a problem. And I think that's maybe something that you need to ask them about. Why are your ratings so low? Visit the management company, go look at their offices. Are they organized? Are they a mess? Do they even have an office? Where are your records stored if they're not being stored electronically? You want to meet the people that you're going to be working with, including who would be our manager, who's head of finances, meet the CEO of the company. These are all important relationships, and you'll want to get a vibe for them and see if you think this is going to be a good fit for your association. You'll want to double check to make sure that the management company hasn't had any problems with embezzlement or any financial problems for the management company. Usually your attorney can do a little investigating and provide you with, information if anything like that has happened in the past. Inquire about policy and methods regarding the working relationship with the board. You want to have a good relationship with the management company and with the manager. And so talk about what's your, philosophy on the relationship between the management company and the association's board. I mean, kind of key things I want to hear. I'm on my board. I want to hear that they want to make my life easier, right? Perfect, because it's a volunteer job. I want to hear that they're going to take care of business. The finances are going to be in order. Bills are going to be paid on time. Owners' phone calls are going to be returned promptly. If I see something as as an owner in the association and as a board member, like the fence is falling over, or the pool has an issue, or the hot tub is broken, and I'm contacting them, I want to see that that's being handled in a timely manner. And so kind of talk the philosophies with them. Basically, what you're going to want to do is just figure out which companies would be a good fit and which ones you are going to want to, potentially interview. A couple of suggestions after you, come up with your list of management companies that you think might be a good fit after going through kind of the process we've described. You can identify and create a timeline for the selection process. It may be short or it may be long. And you may be doing this even before you give your termination letter to, your existing management company. Or you may not be, because like I said, sometimes the management companies are talking between themselves. So come up with what's your timeline that's going to be, consistent with what the termination provision is in the contract with your current management company. Then come up with bidding specifications. We have a sample RFP, request for a proposal, that we can give anybody who's on this call for free. And it basically is just an RFP that you send out to management companies. And it's a generic one, and you can fine tune it based upon the needs of your association. But we send the same RFP out to every management company that you plan to interview. Identify, you already have your list of companies, and that's going to be at that point who you're going to send out the information to. Give them the RFP, ask them to return it by a certain date. After you, receive the bids back, you're going to want to evaluate them in an apples to apples format. That's why you do the request for, the bids, and you ask them to respond in a certain way. So it'll be very easy to compare a management company A, B, and C in terms of the price, what they offer for the price, etc. After you get those bids back, what we typically do is we just do a grid comparing them. Like try to do like a 1-page summary of the 2 or 3 management companies you're going to be interviewing. You're going to want to make sure that you check the references and then bring them in for a interview. And so we have on our cheat sheet a number of questions on how to select a management company that you can ask. Whatever you do, don't ask all of them because those questions are pretty extensive, but pick and choose which ones you think are the best questions that your associations needs the most. You're going to want to check the references. Like I said, you're going to want to check to make sure that they're financially sound, what their reputation is, by reaching out to your trusted advisors like your attorney or CPA, your insurance company. And then you're going to do the interview at an open meeting, like I said, and ultimately you're going to determine which one you like the best. And at that point, you don't tell them they're hired yet. Basically, what you tell them is, hey, we're very interested in hiring you, this one company. Can you please send over a sample contract? You're going to want to send that sample contract to your attorney because we're going to take a look at it, just like we looked at the contract for, what we talked about earlier today for a large capital improvement project. We also look at the contract for, the management company. And I want to make sure, because the management company typically writes that contract, I want to make sure that it's fair. And so we're going to be looking at the language in the contract, how indemnification is handled, because we don't want to be, the association shouldn't be indemnifying a management company if they're making, errors. We don't want to have to pay for, the management company is making a mistake. We don't want to have to be indemnifying them for, gross negligence. Or any other mistakes that they're making. So oftentimes we rework the indemnification language, we work on the termination provisions. We want to make sure that they're fair and that they don't have one of those sweetheart deals where you can only terminate the contract one time a year during a 60-day window. Other than that, the contract automatically renews. So we'll look at and make sure that you're paying fair market value for whatever they listed as an extra charge on Exhibit A. And then after the attorney gets the comments back to you, usually we don't have a lot of comments. It's just the main really important things, usually 2 or 3 things we change. Then you go back to the management company that you want to select and you just kind of negotiate it with them. Most of the time, the stuff that we are changing in the contract is not anything that they're going to object to. And then you sign the contract. The board votes to approve it at an open board meeting, and the president typically signs on behalf of the board. And you start the transition process. A couple things to talk about with the transition process from, your former management company to your new management company. A lot of boards are scared that this is going to be a lot of work. It shouldn't be any work for the board. Really, the new management company takes over. They contact the old management company, they work out any transition details, and it should be a relatively seamless transfer of power as the management company. And so it's not a big deal, in my opinion. Sometimes issues come up where the old management company doesn't want to give records, or they're being kind of dragging their feet on giving information to the new management company. And in those cases, I typically am asked to write a letter to the old management company asking them to, be more reasonable and get the records over as soon as possible. And usually it's resolved with one letter. So really, that's kind of our big summary today of the bidding and contracting process. We've talked a little bit about what are some strategies for bidding and contracting and selecting top-notch service providers for capital improvement projects. We've talked about vendor relationships. Specifically, we talked today about the management company and, what to do if you're having problems with them, when to know when it's time to move on, and then how you move on to a new management company or even a new vendor. The same kind of analysis could be done for a landscaping company or maybe a pool contractor. So I think we've given you some useful tips from being in the trenches for 25 plus years on how to handle all things vendors. And really appreciate all of you being here today. We had 152 people attending, which is amazing. We're finishing our vendor discussion right at noon on the dot, which is amazing. Just some concluding remarks for today. Don't forget that we have a number of other learning opportunities in April this month. On April 16th, which is tomorrow, we have a class with the City of Chandler. And then again on April 23rd, another class with the City of Chandler HOA Academy from 4 o'clock to 5:30 p.m. on Zoom. You can check out the topics for those classes and sign up for them by going to our webpage at mulcahylawfirm.com. So 2 more live opportunities to hear our firm speak on different topics this week and then next week. And it's free as well. I don't believe that you have to be with the City of Chandler to join these classes. So if you're interested, go to our website and sign up. Let's look forward to May. We have several learning opportunities in May of 2025. The first one is our live virtual First Friday event, which is the first Friday of May 2nd at 9 a.m., where I hop online and answer questions. Typically we get about 50 or 60 questions and we answer all of them in about an hour and a half. So you're welcome to submit your questions via our website. We also have in May a virtual HOA Academy, just like today. It's our monthly one, the third Tuesday of every month, which is Tuesday, May 20th at 11 a.m. And this is going to be a really important class for board members. It's on board excellence. Everything you need to know about being a board member. What are your roles? What are your responsibilities? How do you get in trouble by making, mistakes? How can you avoid making those mistakes? A board member code of conduct, is it a good idea to adopt? So we're really going to be talking about everything related to being on the board. What are your responsibilities? How can you hit the tripwires and make mistakes, and how to have a successful one? Is a code of conduct a good idea? We're going to be covering all of that on Tuesday, May 20th. And then last but not least, we have a summit with the Surprise HOA Summit. And that's going to be Wednesday, May 21st at 6 p.m. You can check out our website for more information on that as well. Okay, thanks everybody for being here today. I hope that everybody has a wonderful Easter and you're already having a wonderful Passover this week. Thank you so much for being here today and caring about your communities. Take care, everybody. Happy Easter, happy Passover.